Data Ari channel. In today's video, we're diving into one of the most important steps before you start working in Power BI Desktop, configuring your essential settings. Specifically, we look at the Options and Settings menu, Current File Settings. These are the foundational adjustments that ensure your reports run smoothly, behave exactly the way you expect. Understanding these settings isn't just a technical detail, it's a critical step. By setting them up correctly from the start, you will avoid common pitfalls, save time, and make sure your data models are optimized for performance and accuracy. So, whether you are new to Power BI or looking to refine your workflow, stick with me as we walk through the key configuration you should always check before beginning your project. Alright, let's get started with the essential settings in Power BI Desktop. In this video, we will cover the following topics step by step: Power BI Desktop, Options and Settings, Options Global and Current File, and then Options Current File, and then we go through Important Settings, Data Load, Regional Settings, Privacy, Auto Recovery, Publish Semantic Model Settings, Query Reduction, and Report Settings. Before you start building reports in Power BI Desktop, it's important to understand the options and settings. These configurations shape how your files behave, how data is loaded, and how your reports interact with users. Power BI gives us powerful flexibility, but did you know there are two very different ways to control your settings? Let's break down Current File with global settings so you will be never confused again. First up, Current File Settings. These apply only to the report you are working on right now. Think of it as a fine-tuning behavior, privacy, and performance for a single file. You'd use this when a report has unique needs. Maybe it's working with a massive data set, or it requires special privacy rules. On the other hand, global settings apply everywhere, across all reports you create or open in Power BI Desktop. This is where you define your default environments, performance preferences, security rules, and personalization. Configure it once, and it becomes the foundation for all your work. And by the way, we've already discussed global settings in detail in a separate video. You can find that right here on my YouTube channel if you'd like a deeper dive. In Power BI Desktop, the Current File Settings gives you control over how your report behaves. These options are specific to the files you're working on, and they can make a huge difference in performance, accuracy, and user experience. Let's walk through them one by one. First, Data Load. This controls how your data is imported and refreshed. You can enable background data loading, automatic relationship detection, and auto-date timetables. Adjusting this helps balance speed with accuracy, especially when working with large datasets. Next, Regional Settings. This defines the local for numbers, dates, and currency formatting. It ensures your report matches your audience standard, whether that's German date formats or US currency symbols. Privacy Settings lets you assign levels to your data source, public, organizational, or private. This prevents unintended data mixing and keeps you compliant with organizational and security rules. Auto Recovery determines how often Power BI saves recovery information for your file. It's your safety net, restoring work after unexpected crashes or interruptions. When you publish, the semantic model settings define how your dataset behaves in the Power BI service. Here you configure refresh schedules, storage modes, and how your dataset interacts with other reports. Query Reduction controls how filters, slicers, and visuals update. You can delay auto-apply until the user clicks apply, which is a lifesaver for performance when working with large datasets. And finally, Report settings. This defines default behaviors for visuals and fields, like whether values are summarized by sum, average, or none. You can also enable preview features and interaction options to standardize how your reports look and behave. We go through the current file important settings: data load, regional settings, privacy, auto recovery, publish, semantic model, query reduction, and report setting. Current file data load. Imagine you've just opened Power BI Desktop, ready to build a new report, and you're excited. But before you dive into visuals and data, there are a few settings hiding in the background that can completely change how your report behaves. Today, I go through 3 of them: relationships, time intelligence, and background data. Picture this: you import data from different sources and Power BI says, "Hey, I think these tables are connected. Want me to link them up?" Sounds helpful, right? But here is the catch. Sometimes those automatic connections aren't what you want. That's why I recommend keeping options like import relationships from data sources and update or delete relationships when refreshing turned off, unless you really trust the source system. And for professional models, it's best to turn off auto-detect new relationships too. Think of it like friendships. You want to be one deciding who connects with whom, not letting Power BI play matchmaker without your approval. Now let's talk about time intelligence. This setting is like Power BI's built-in calendar brain. For small data sets, it's super handy. You flip it on and suddenly you've got the date hierarchies and quick calculations ready to go. But when your models get bigger and you're working on something advanced, that shortcut can actually hold you back. In those cases, it's smarter to turn time intelligence off and build your own dedicated date table. And finally, background data. This one decides whether Power BI keeps crunching numbers behind the scenes while you are working. If your dataset is small, leave it on. But with large datasets, background processing can slow everything down. In that case, turn it off so Power BI only works when you tell it to. It's a bit like multitasking. Fine when the workload is light, but risky when things get heavy. Current file regional settings. Imagine you build a beautiful Power BI report, the visuals look great, the data is solid, but then someone in your audience says, "Wait, why does the date look backwards?" Or "Why are the numbers using commas instead of dots?" That's where the local for import setting comes in. You will find these settings under Options and Settings, Current File, Local for Import. It's a small option, but it decides how Power BI interprets and displays your data. Local controls 3 key things: date formats, number separators, currency symbols. In short, it makes sure your report speaks the same language as your audience. So, what is the best choice? If your report is for a local audience, like viewers in Germany, set the local to German. That way, dates, numbers, and currency look familiar. If your report is for an international audience, match the local to your viewers, or use a neutral standard like ENUS that keeps things consistent when your audience is global. And in my case, I've chosen to use English United States format. It's a neutral, widely recognized standard that works well when your audience is diverse or international. Current file privacy. Imagine you're combining data from different sources in Power BI, maybe an Excel file, a database, and a cloud service. Sounds powerful, right? But here is the risk. What if sensitive information from one source accidentally leaks into another during transformations? That's exactly why the privacy settings exist. We will find this under Options and Settings, Current File, and Privacy. It's a small menu, but it plays a big role in keeping your data safe. Privacy settings control how Power BI handles data when you combine sources in queries. The goal is simple. Make sure sensitive data isn't accidentally exposed to other sources while you are transforming or merging information. The safest choice is to always combine data according to your privacy level settings. That way, Power BI respects the privacy levels you assign, whether that's private, organizational, or public. Current file auto recovery. Auto recovery in Power BI desktop sounds like a lifesaver, but whether you should use it depends on the size of your dataset. Let's look at both scenarios. If you are working with a small dataset, auto recovery might not feel like a big deal. Power BI saves recovery information in the background, and because the data is light, you probably won't notice much slowdown. With large datasets, auto recovery can become a real problem. Every time Power BI tries to save recovery information, it eats up resources. That means longer waits, lagging visuals, and a slower workflow. In this case, auto recovery does more harm than good. Turning it off keeps your performance smooth and lets you stay in control. Again, the best practice is clear. Disable auto recovery. Current file publish semantic model settings. When you publish a dataset to the Power BI service, you have to decide how Power BI connects to your dataset. And while direct query might sound like a great option, it often creates more problem than it solves. Let's look at why you should select Discourage direct query connection in your settings. You will find this under Options and Settings, Current File Publish Semantic Model. This is where you control how your dataset behaves once it's published. Direct query means Power BI goes back to the source system every time you interact with a visual. That might sound like a real-time magic, but here is the reality. Performance slows down because every click depends on the source system. DAX functionality is limited, so you can't use the full power of calculations. And if the source system is unavailable, your report simply won't work. It's like running to the grocery store every time you need an ingredient, slow, inconvenient, and unreliable. That's why the best practice is to select Discourage direct query connections. This encourages import mode where Power BI brings the data into its own engine. Import mode is faster, supports richer transformations, and is much easier for learners to understand. Current file query redaction. Power BI gives us amazing interactivity, filters, slicers, and visuals that respond instantly. But sometimes, especially with big data sets, that instant response can slow things down. That's where the query redaction settings come in. They let you control how much Power BI queries the data behind the scenes so you can balance speed and usability. You will find these options under Options and Settings, Current File Query Redaction. Let's walk through them one by one. Normally, when you click on one visual, Power BI highlights related data in other visuals. That's called cross-highlighting. For example, imagine you click on Germany in a sales chart. Instantly, your revenue chart, customer chart, and product chart all update to highlight Germany's data. Powerful, but behind the scene, that's multiple queries firing at once. If performance is a concern, say you're working with millions of rows, so you can turn on cross-highlighting by default in query redaction. This reduces the number of queries Power BI runs, keep things snappy. And next is slicers. These are drop-downs or checkboxes that let users filter data. For small data sets, import mode, slicers are lightweight. For example, you are teaching a class with a demo data sets of 1000 rows. When a student selects 2025 in the slicers, Power BI instantly applies the filters. No lag, no problem. For large data sets, direct query mode, things change. For example, you are connected to a live SQL database with 50 million rows. Every slicer change sends a query back to the database. If a user clicks through multiple slicers options, that's multiple queries and performance tanks. That's why in direct query mode, You should turn on the option to delay slicer changes until apply is clicked. This way, users can make all their selections, then send just one query when they are ready. It's like filling your shopping cart first, then checking out once, and instead of paying for each item separately. Finally, filters. This works just like slicers, but they are often used in the filter pane. In import mode, for example, you are building a demo report for a training session. The dataset is small and already loaded into Power BI. Here you can let filters apply instantly. It's fast and there is no performance issue. In direct query mode, for example, you're analyzing real-time sales data from a cloud database. If filters apply instantly, every click sends a query back to the source. That's inefficient. Instead, add a single apply button. This way, users can adjust multiple filters, like selecting a date range, product category, and region, and only send one query when they click apply. So here is the big picture. Use cross-highlighting by default if performance is tight, manage slicers differently, instant for small datasets, apply button for large direct query datasets, and adjust filters the same way, instant for import mode, apply button for direct query. These small tweaks make your report smoother, faster, and more professional. Report setting visual options. When you build a Power BI report, the visuals are the star of the show. But how those visuals behave and how users interact with them depends on the visual options inside the report settings. Let's walk through them one by one with real examples. You will find the settings under Options and Settings, Current File, Report Settings, Visual Options. They may look small, but they can completely change how your audience experiences your report. First, the visual header in Reading View. This is the little toolbar that appears at the top of each visual with options like Export, Spotlight, or Focus Mode. If you keep it off, users can access those options. Example, imagine a manager wants to export a chart to Excel or spotlight a KPI during a meeting. With the header visible, they can do that easily. If you turn it on, the header disappears. This keeps the view clean and focused, which is perfect for demos or teaching sessions where you don't want distractions. So the choice depends on your audience. Do they need extra tools, or do you want them to stay focused on the visuals themselves? Next, the modern visual header. This gives you updated styling options, cleaner icons, and a more polished look. Recommendation is that keep this on. For example, in older headers, icons could look cluttered or outdated. The modern headers make your report feel professional and consistent, whether you're sharing it with colleagues or presenting to executives. Finally, let's talk about default visual interaction. By default, visuals use cross-highlighting, meaning if you click on one bar in a chart, related data in other visuals is highlighted. Cross-highlighting is great. For example, you click on Germany in a sales chart and other visuals highlight Germany's data while still showing the rest for comparison. But for a structured teaching dashboard, filtering is often more intuitive. For example, in a training session, if a student clicks on Germany, they expect all visuals to filter down to Germany only. That's clear and easier to understand. Recommendation is that turn on the option to change default interaction from cross-highlighting to filtering. It makes dashboards more predictable and user-friendly, especially in teaching and demo environments. Current file report settings filtering experience. When you build a Power BI report, the filter pane is one of the most important tools for your audience. It decides how users interact with the data, whether they can set, change filter types, or just apply filters directly. Let's explore the filtering experience settings and see how to make them work best. You'll find these options under Options and Settings, Current File Report Settings, Filtering Experience. Two key settings here can really shape the user experience. First, the options to allow users to change filter types. At first glance, this sounds flexible. User could switch between different filter slides like drop-downs, checkboxes, or sliders. But here is the problem. It can confuse your audience and break consistency in your report design. For example, imagine you build a clean dashboard for a training session. One student changes a filter from a drop-down to a slider, while another keeps the drop-down. Suddenly, the experience is inconsistent, and your teaching flow is disrupted. That's why the recommendation is clear. Turn this off. Keep control of the filter types so your report stays predictable and professional. Enable search for the filter pane. This one is a lifesaver, especially when you're working with long lists. For example, imagine you have a data set with hundreds of product names. Without search, users have to scroll endlessly to find product X. With search enabled, they just type the name and apply the filter instantly. Recommendation is keep this on. It makes filters faster, easier, and far more user-friendly. Report setting export data. Exporting data sounds simple, but in Power BI it can change how your audience interacts with your reports. Let's look at the export data settings and see which options make sense for different scenarios. You will find these options under Options and Settings, Current File, Report Settings, Export Data. There are three main choices here. This option lets users export the raw data behind the visual. At first glance, it sounds helpful, but here is the problem. Exporting raw data can expose more than you intended. For example, if you applied role-level security or build a simplified teaching dashboard, exporting raw tables could confuse users or even reveal sensitive details. That's why the recommendation is keep this off. Don't let users pull out raw data directly. This option that allow end users to export data with current layout is much safer and more useful. It lets users export data exactly as they see in the visual, with filters, formatting, and layout preserved. For example, imagine a manager wants to take a KPI chart from your dashboard and drop it into a presentation. With this setting on, they get the same numbers and the layout they saw in Power BI without extra hidden data. Recommendation is turn this on. It keeps the export feature practical while protecting the integrity of your model. Don't allow end users to export any data. These options block all exports. While it might sound secure, it can frustrate users who just want to reuse a chart or share a quick table. Recommendation is keep this off, and instead of blocking everything, give them the controlled option to export with the current layout. Report settings cross-report read-through. Power BI reports are powerful on their own, but sometimes you want them to work together. Almost like chapters in a bigger story, that's where cross-report read-through comes in. It lets users right-click on a data point in one report and read through to a related page in a different report. Where you can find this, you will find this option under Options and Settings, Current File, Report Settings, Cross-Report Read-Through. It looks simple, but it can change how your reports interact with each other. Think of it like connecting multiple reports together so they behave like one larger analytical experience. For example, you have a sales overview report and a customer details report. With cross-report read-through enabled, the user can right-click on a customer in the sales report and jump straight into their detailed profile in the customer report. It feels seamless, like moving between chapters in the same book. But here is the catch. Cross-report read-through only makes sense in certain scenarios. If you're working on a shared project across different units where multiple teams maintain separate reports but need them to connect, then enabling this feature can be very powerful. But for most cases, especially standalone dashboards, teaching projects, or demos, it adds unnecessary complexity. User might get confused jumping between reports, and managing those links can become a headache. That's why the recommendation is keep cross-report delete through off, unless you're working on a shared project across different units. Report settings, personalized visuals. Power BI reports are usually designed by the creator with visual carefully chosen to tell a story. But sometimes, the people consuming the report want to adjust those visuals to fit their own needs. That's where the personalized visuals features comes in. You will find this option on the Options and Settings, Current File, Report Settings, Personalized Visuals. It looks simple, but it can completely change how your audience interact with your report. Personalized visuals lets report consumers, not just the creator, adjust visuals to their own preferences. For example, imagine you build a sales dashboard with a bar chart. A manager reviewing their report might prefer to see the same data as a pie chart or swap the measure from revenue to profit. With personalized visuals turned on, they can make those changes for themselves without altering the underlying report for anyone else. Sounds powerful, right? But here's the catch. Too much personalization can lead to confusion. In most cases, like teaching dashboards, demos, or standalone reports, you want consistency. If every user changes visuals differently, it becomes harder to follow the same story. But in shared projects across different units, where multiple teams collaborate and need flexibility, personalized visuals can be very useful. It allows each unit to adapt the visuals to their own context without breaking the shared reports. That's why the recommendation is turn personalized visuals off unless you're working on a shared project across different units. Thanks for joining me on this ride. I'm Arefa, a business intelligence data analyst in Germany. Power BI isn't just a tool, it's a mindset. If you found this helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who is ready to level up their data game. Keep exploring, keep building, and keep going.